Welcome back to The Real. I am Nadine, and this is husband.
Hello, it's Jason. Nice to see you all again, somewhat.
And we just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. If you've been with us for a while, thank you. If you are new here, don't forget to subscribe. And if you've been watching us for a while and you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting on? So we just want to thank you, thank you, thank you.
Absolutely. And today we are going into a topic that we briefly touched in one of our other videos, a topic that's near and dear to my heart, being a mental health advocate, I guess you can say. Today, we're going to talk about mental health and relationships. And who better to talk about such a topic than someone who is a professional in that area? Because like we said in the last video, when you want to know something, you talk to the professionals. So with that said, we are going to hand over to our special guest today, Estella. And we'll have her introduce
Hi, everyone. My name's Estella. I am a licensed mental health counselor. I have been working in the field for, I want to say, almost 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it does not seem that long. Nadine and I went to Karen together. That's where I got my master's from. I have a master's in Christian counseling. So it does not seem that long since I've been out in that area. So I don't know if you guys want to know, I usually work with people with anxiety and depression. I also work with people who have a history of trauma. My youngest client right now is 4 years old, and I think my oldest client is in her 60s. So I kind of run the gamut with the type of people that I work with. So.
Excellent. And that's why you are perfect for today's topic. You have a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience, and a vast array of people that you see, a demographic of individuals that you counsel. So first, thank you for the work that you do.
Yes, thank you so much. And yes, we went to school together, and this is my BFF, y'all.
Yes.
Right. And if I need a little bit of counseling, like this is the one that I go to. She helped me to keep sane. So thank you.
Vice versa.
Facts.
What friends are.
Right, exactly. Facts. So I want to ask you, Estella, what do you think? Do you think it's important for someone that's going into a relationship to seek counseling, to seek mental health, or just any kind of counseling, I would say? What is your thought on that?
Definitely 100%. And I know when you guys were preparing to get married, that was something that was important to you guys as well. And so we talked a lot about that.
Yes.
I know when I get married myself, I am definitely going to get premarital counseling. It helps with just having that foundation and talking about probably things that you haven't talked about yet.
Right.
And just like opening up the communication, so that helps with when you are married and you deal with those things, that you've already had some background in that.
Facts.
And then what about an individual basis? So before we hop to marriage, if someone knows they're struggling with some type of mental health, what would you say for the individual looking to get into a relationship with someone?
That's good.
I think counseling is for everyone. I know that there is, unfortunately, this stigma that you have to be crazy to go to see a counselor, and that is not at all the case. I view myself as a guide for people to help just uncover maybe things that they did not see themselves, because sometimes it does help, one, to just talk to someone about things. A lot of times we get in our head and we can go into this spiral, and so it helps to have someone to be kind of like a sounding board. And then just uncovering things about yourself is going to be so much better once you get into a relationship.
I agree. So with that being said, do you believe that it is important for a person to be whole? So depression, you deal with anxiety as well, right? Do you think that it's important for that individual to go to counseling and be whole before entering into a relationship? Like, what's your thought about that? Because go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, go ahead.
Okay.
So let's see, I think it was 3 years I worked in an addictions recovery center. And one of the things that they would always tell people initially when they were in recovery was to at least a year, 2 years, be single and not be in a relationship. And that is because in order to have a successful relationship, you have to be able to devote yourself to that person. And you're not going to be able to grow and get better yourself if your time is divided in a relationship. So yes, I truly believe that it's important to at least have some sort of healing and wholeness before you enter into a relationship if you want that relationship to be successful.
So I want to keep that topic going, or stay on task with the relationships, and then we'll start to I think stray away maybe a little bit. But what advice would you give to someone who is in a relationship with someone who has mental health issues? Issue is not good. That's struggling with mental health. It's not an issue.
It's not, right.
That's not good. It's not a good connotation. So someone who's struggling with mental health, what would you say to someone who's in a relationship with that person?
That is a loaded question, because I think of the different aspects of that. And so I also think of like healthy boundaries in relationships, and trying not to get to the point where you are then being that person's counselor or therapist. And so encouraging your significant other to go to counseling, and then maybe even see if there's a group or any type of thing like that, so that person can get support as well. Because it's hard to care for someone who is struggling, because you love them and you want to see them better, but it's not your job to fix them.
Wow. Yeah.
I like that. Not your job to fix them. That's big.
Yeah, that is really, really big. Well, along the same lines, I'm going to ask, how about a parent that have a child or children who are struggling with that? What advice would you give to that parent?
So I think it depends on the age of the child as well. So if I think of my younger children, well, any age, a parent should ideally be as involved in the counseling process as the child. Because when I'm working with children or even adolescents, I see them an hour out of their week, maybe 2 at the most. But the parent is the one that sees them 24/7, right? So it's not going to be effective if I'm working with the child and the parent is kind of like, here you go, fix them, you know?
True.
So I think that, and then also reading like some books, doing like family therapy. When I work with children, it's usually, in order to build rapport, I start out with them by themselves, but hopefully getting to the point where family therapy is included in that as well, because at the end of the day, they're going to be the one that has the most influence on them.
That is true. That is true. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
So it's so easy to get off into the different portions of counseling, and I'm very tempted because, you know, when you talk about families, you start to talk about the roles in the family and what level the person, how their interaction affects the other people, but we're going to stay away from that for right now.
Well, can I put, because it reminds me of like family dynamics. So this is something that a lot of parents may have difficulty like accepting, but children respond to their parents. And so if things are happening in the home, happening in their child, short of like maybe I would say like anxiety, depression, or like being on the spectrum. Those are natural like responses that children have. But in terms of behavior and things like that, that parents want to see, it's hard sometimes to take a look at themselves and what they're doing to perpetuate what is happening in the behavior of their children.
That is so true. That is true.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
So what would you suggest, being that you're a therapist, what would you suggest to people in general on how to improve their mental health?
Yeah.
I think just being curious is the first step. So if like coming from the viewpoint that, oh, counseling or mental health is crazy, like I said earlier, or I know in some circles, especially in the Christian arena, sometimes we look at those things as spirits. And yes, there are spirits, but there is a difference between spiritual things and natural things. And so the way that our brains work, especially when we are feeling depressed, it's a hormone imbalance.
Right.
When we are anxious, those are normal responses to things of life. Sometimes it just gets to the point where it's overwhelming and not as manageable. So I think being curious is number one. I think sometimes we're so rigid and not flexible, and we're not introspective, and we sometimes use God to like be a band-aid over our issues.
Yes, talk about it.
One of the things that I'm so passionate about is just how scripture to me lines up like totally with cognitive behavioral therapy and some of the other theories that are out there. And God wants us to have freedom. And in order for us to have freedom, we have to look at all of what is going on in here before we can actually submit that to him to work with us on those things. So if we're not curious, if we're not flexible, if we're rigid and we use God as a band-aid instead of using him to support us in those things that we deal with, that can lead to being in a cycle and what some may call generational curses. To me, I think a lot of generational curses are just, we behaved a certain way and it's just passed down in our family, and we are not willing to actually take a introspective look and see what is actually going on.
Oh, wow. That was great. Yeah. Wow. And I know that you're passionate about that because we have spoke about that. So I know you and I share that in common. Along those lines, you said about the Christian community. I know that in the Black community, I gotta say it, that that's also a struggle because a lot of Black people don't look at mental health as an issue. They, like you said, they think that it's basically a spirit. What would you say? What would you say to someone if they ask you right now, you know, what about mental health would you tell go to a Black community or a Black person, or for us, what would you say to them?
Well, I think first, our mistrust is well placed. If you look at history, there's been countless examples of people in authority taking advantage of us. So I think that mistrust is well placed. At the same time, we have a history of trauma that continues to be perpetuated. And is perpetuated even more if you look at gang violence and prison rates and things like that. So we are a people that have struggles and finding someone that you can trust. And I know it's hard because lots of people out there that don't understand how race plays a part in our mental health, but trying to find someone that you can trust to come alongside and help like just educate even about how trauma impacts our brain and our bodies. Like I'm reading a book called The Body Keeps the Score right now. And it's just about how our brains respond to trauma, how trauma is like held in our bodies.
Yes.
So that is something that is just continually being passed down, and we have to break the cycle. When you know better, you do better. And it's not easy. I'm not saying that it's easy. I've had even my own experience where I had to go to counseling myself, but I'm so much better for it. So when you can find someone that you trust and that has empathy and understands where you're coming from, that's the first step.
Yeah. Wow.
Agreed. You know, I'm gonna look into the camera and say this. You touched on a few things. So we want our viewers out there to know who may be dealing with things like gang violence.
Yes.
Something we don't like to talk about in the Black community is molestation.
Wow.
From family members. You know, we don't tell what Uncle Johnny did or whatever the case is, or even disclosing that you were molested by someone and not being believed by your guardian or parent. That's a big deal. Living in these urban environments, you know, the gunshots, the fear, there are a lot of things. And PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is a real thing. And it's not just for soldiers. It is for people once your body's in a fight or flight response. And like Estella said, the body does store.
It does.
It stores those things. Just think about if you were in a car accident or close to a car accident. Every time you go to that intersection, you're going to be a little jumpy. You're going to be a little antsy. So
he's talking about me also.
I was just giving an example, but she want to say it's her, whatever. So it's a real thing. But towards the end, you touched on something that is great segue. You didn't even know, to my next question, and that is building trust. Because we have to build trust. We have to trust the person that we are going to be speaking to about some very intimate issues in our lives. What characteristics, what qualities, what things, what things on a resume even should we be looking for a person who is going to be speaking to us as a therapist or a clinician?
So I know a lot of times looking for someone licensed is kind of like the thing now. But I would say going through school, you get your master's, you have to do an internship. So anyone that is practicing in the field, because if you think of state laws and things like that, you cannot practice as a counselor without having gone to school and things like that. So I know sometimes we have this connotation that, oh, licensed is better, and that's not necessarily true. So that's the first thing, because I know Nadine knows this. It took me 6.5 years to get my license, because Indiana has very strict laws and different than Pennsylvania. So license does not actually equal competent. So that's one thing. The other thing is just seeing if that person like actually listens to what you have to say. A good counselor is going to hear what you have to say, not always ask you questions, but reflect back what you are saying, even like make meaning from what you're saying and see like the deeper things and guide you in that way. So definitely someone who is attentive, has good listening skills. And then I would say go with your gut. So if you don't feel like that person is for you, they're not for you. And I know that that can be frustrating, finding someone that you trust. But that is vital in the process, having someone that you trust. And not everyone works well with every type of personality.
That's true too.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. You know, Babe said something which I think is really, really important. Like you said a lot of important things. So, well, facts. But what advice would you give to someone who have been molested, right? And to go into a relationship, because as all of us know, that will affect your relationship.
The
And
intimacy
yeah,
portion,
exactly. Yeah, the intimacy portion. And what advice would you give someone who is facing that and actually don't know what to do?
Yeah, that's tough. So a lot of times with trauma, we can be triggered and it could be years and you forgot about it. And then you get in a relationship and you have all of these feelings and feeling threatened. So Jason talked a little bit about this. When your body is in fight or flight, and when you have a history of trauma, anything that like remotely resembles that, your body will respond like, I am in a dangerous situation. Yeah. So that's why a lot of times people, like, they may have forgotten that something like this happened, or they feel like they healed and they put it behind them, and then they enter a new phase in their life. There's a change, a transition, they're in a relationship, and then all of these things come flooding in.
Right.
So the thing with trauma, and I think that some people feel like, oh, I have to rehash my story, blah, 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 this kind of stuff. Right. But research has shown that you could not at all rehash your story and figure out how that trauma has impacted you and heal that way without like ever getting into that. So I think there's a misconception that like I have to force myself to work through these things. And when it comes to trauma, forcing yourself to do something is never going to, well, with anything, but especially with trauma, if you are not ready, even to like go over the sordid details or whatever, you can still learn how that has impacted you and find healing without even going into all of those details.
Wow.
Great
yeah,
answer.
Great answer.
So I have like one more question and maybe a possible. I just think a lot of the things that are coming up are great things. And some of these are questions we don't even have written down. They're just kind of coming as you're speaking to us. And this next one definitely is. But I think what you just mentioned also is very important about hidden trauma in our bodies. And one thing I want people to be aware of as well, and even speaking about choosing a counselor that's right for you, is you can have an adverse reaction to the person counseling you just due to characteristics of maybe they remind you of someone, or there's a certain way they speak, or maybe even down to a fragrance that they wear that may trigger you to something else. So don't be surprised. Don't let that be an off-put to you in therapy. And that's something to keep in the back of your head as well while choosing someone. But my question, unless you look like you might have had something to say, Estella.
I was just remembering, because when we were talking about like the Black community, I think it's important to like point out that sometimes we don't have the privilege of feeling like we can address those emotions. Wow. I don't know if you guys saw the recent video that a woman posted from Victoria's Secret where this woman was her around the store.
Oh yes.
And so I was watching her reaction video after that, and it just like hit me like, we respond like as the Black community maybe in ways that seem abnormal because we have not had the privilege of expressing those emotions. So I just wanted to point that out because I think that sometimes maybe we get so accustomed to our experience and maybe the lack of emotional expression that then we think that there's not something going on when there is.
I agree. Yeah. So the follow-up question would be this, because I think some of the stigma that comes along with counseling is there is this mysticism that revolves around counseling. So we want to demystify in this time a little bit, because everyone hasn't gone to, I went to school to be a therapist. You've obviously gone to be to school to be a therapist, and I know that Nadine knows about it as well, that when we just talk us kind of through what happens, because TV has done Dr. Phil's of the world and different things have done terrible things for what people think or expect counseling to be, and it's not that. I think if we can clear that up a little bit, people today watching, hopefully, will have different thoughts towards counseling. It's great. Like you said earlier, I think it's rated E for everyone. It's just great. Counseling is great. But go ahead, Estelle.
So I think the best way to describe it is that when you find a good counselor, it should be a safe space where you feel like you can be yourself, whoever that may be. And I even think of like creating that safe space, just like God creates that safe space for me. I can go to him with anything and he's going to love me unconditionally. So a good counselor should be someone where you feel comfortable enough sharing the innermost, deepest parts of you. And it's a safe space where you feel comfortable doing that.
And I think it's a lot like what we're doing now. This is counseling. You know, you sit in a room with someone. It doesn't have to be awkward. Maybe the first session or so, you're building rapport. But you know, you're just talking, just like we are. And a good clinician is not telling you what to do. Right. They're showing you things about yourself, patterns in your life, so that you can come to your own conclusion. There are certain techniques that they teach us in times where we have to be a little bit more pointed and maybe point out to a person like, no, this is what it is. But by and large, a counselor like Estelle is not telling you, this is what's wrong with you. Do this. That's not happening. We're trying to show you these are the things that are happening. When you do this, this happens. When you've done this, this happens.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point. So someone like who gives lots of advice, I don't consider myself to be an advice giver. I may have like things that I've learned and tools that I've learned that may help you. But at the end of the day, the person that I'm working with, you know yourself better than I do. I can just like maybe point out things that as you're talking, I might notice or see or, you know, stuff like that. But I am not an advice giver. If you want a coach, then go find a coach. But
Exactly.
Right.
But the beauty of counseling too is like, and I know like when I first started, I'm like, ooh, I think that's happening, or ooh, that sounds, you know, but allowing the other person to figure that stuff out on their own, that's what a good clinician will do, because it's more powerful when you see it yourself than if I tell you. And same with like the things that we believe about ourselves. I could tell you that you are great all day long, but if you don't believe it, it means nothing. So I think that's the other thing that is my favorite part of being a counselor, is just building up someone's skills and their view of themselves.
Yeah, and I will say you're great at doing that.
I agree.
You are great at doing what you do. I will say, I have told you before that you are called for this. This is what God have called you for. And you do a really wonderful job. Well, I honestly don't have any more questions unless you do, babe.
I mean, my possible is doesn't have to be possible tonight.
Let's make it possible.
I'm curious.
I mean, it was just going to be a very open-ended general question. Would be, what general advice would you give people? That was it.
And that was going to be my last. See, I know we're connected.
but that's it.
Yeah, that's
so in general, what
advice for like mental health, or like being the best you that you can be, or all of the above?
Yeah, I was gonna say, however you feel, however you interpret that question, given your experience and what you do, let us have it.
Yes, and with relationship as well.
Yes, keeping relationships in the forefront.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think if I think of like relationships, and we talked a little bit about this at the beginning. So boundaries is kind of like a buzzword now. Everyone knows what boundaries are. Right. But I don't know if people like really know what healthy boundaries are. And so even if you think of like a marriage or a romantic relationship, it's important to have healthy boundaries in that relationship too. Yeah. So a lot of times people think that, it just means me advocating for myself and I'm going to set my limits and things like that. But if you think about a successful, healthy relationship, Having boundaries that are flexible, not necessarily about like things in terms of abuse or, you know, things like that. But I guess for an example, say you guys want to go to dinner. I know this is like a very small example. Being flexible instead of rigid, like, oh, we're only going to this place, but being flexible. Because if you think of any type of romantic relationship or friendship, having that flexibility. But if you have healthy boundaries, that helps to know who can I be flexible with and who do I need to be more rigid with in terms of my boundaries. So that goes into figuring out what are my values, what are the things that are important to me. So that goes into the introspection. So like we were talking about earlier, figuring out yourself. So what is important to me? What are my values? That way I can set my limits in relationships. And then when I meet that person that I want to build a life with, or I want to be in a relationship with, then I am able to set those limits, but also be flexible with them. And then the other part of healthy boundaries is also respecting the boundaries that someone else sets. So say you guys get into an argument and you are the type of person that loves to talk it out right then.
I know preaching. You are preaching.
Nadine might also be that type of person.
You're right.
But your significant other is like, let me figure out and process. So if you think of introvert versus extrovert, talking things out is the extrovert. Introvert likes to process things themselves and then come back. So respecting that, okay, they need time. Then we can come together when we're both in a less emotional space and actually get through this conversation and find a resolution instead of just butting heads. So I think that would be general advice that I would give in terms of
that's some good stuff.
That was some really good stuff. Yes, I'm gonna tell you, because you described me and Jason at the same time. I'm the one that want to talk it out, you know, and I just want, as you know, we're similar. And so I want to talk it out all the time. I'm like, and Jay is the opposite.
Well, I still want to talk it out, but I want to talk it out when we're not hot.
Right. You would like to wait some and think about it. So, which we find that works. So, you know, I'm not upset and he's not upset and we're not blowing up at each other. So it's better to wait a little bit sometimes.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think you're not fighting against emotion and the issue at that point. You're just fighting against the issue, and both can look at it a little logically,
right,
and not have to be emotional.
Well, because when our emotions are so intense, like literally the logic part of our brain shuts off. So we are not able to find a resolution when our emotions are that high. That's why when you're feeling really anxious, it's like that's the only thing that you can focus on, because logic has gone out the window. So good rule of thumb is to always walk away and wait till you're more calm anyway, with any situation. So
wow.
You know, I stamp it. Approved.
Of course.
I love it.
Yeah, so do I. It's all true. Yeah.
We just want to thank you for your time and a wonderful interview. I don't know if there's anything your BFF wants to say to you, but.
Well, I just want you to tell, you know, our listener, our viewers, how they can get in touch with you if they need to.
That's good.
Yeah, just.
So, I guess the best way to get in touch with me would be to email me. So I don't know if you want me to tell you my email right now, or
if you're comfortable sharing it, and then we can in post we'll just put it below.
Yes.
So it's Estella, ESTELLA at thefrontporchcounselors.com.
Nice.
And so I know in terms of like, if you're looking for a counselor yourself or anything like that, different states have different laws. So if you live outside of Indiana, I probably would not be able to see you because I have to be licensed in that state. But I'm always open to, like, if there's questions or things like that that you want to talk about. I will give a shout out to Karen again.
Yes.
They have a great program and great
Yes.
counselors there. So you can always email me if you have any questions too.
Yes.
So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was really, really great. Thank you.
Yeah, I love talking about this stuff, as you know.
Exactly. I mean, it was awesome. We learned a lot, and I'm pretty sure that our viewers also
learned a lot.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much. Do you want to close us out? Or?
Sure thing. Yeah. Speaking of our viewers, thank you so much for watching to the end. We thank you for all of the previous likes, all the previous comments, and all the previous shares, but we need you to do something again today. We need you to like, share, and comment. All right. We thank you so much. Anyone who's new, thank you. Definitely come and subscribe. We give some real content here, which is why it's The Real with the Smiths. So until next time, we will see you again. Take care.
Bye-bye.